Good evening. I'd like to call this evening's meeting of the Conejo Recreation and Park District Board of Directors to order. And I don't know that we've ever asked Mr. Friedel to lead us in the pledge. So would you do so, please?
My pleasure. Please stand and place your hand over your heart. Ready, begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. May we have the roll call, please?
Director Huffer.
Yes.
Director Lang.
Here.
Director Cusworth.
Here.
Director Nichols. Director Buss.
Here.
Thank you very much. Item 3, we do not have any special presentations this evening. Item 4, Mark, do we have anybody waiting by to speak publicly? Thank you very much. Item 5, approval of the agenda. I'm going to suggest by request that we move item 9C to be the first item under new items. Other than with that one change, I'm going to entertain a motion to approve the agenda. Yes, Dr. Cusworth.
I move that we approve the agenda with 9C being moved on to the front.
Well stated. Thank you. Do I have a motion? Can I get a yes, Director Buss? Second, any questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you very much. Item 6, consent calendar, minutes from the October 5th meeting and approval of warrants. I will entertain a motion on this item. From someone? Thank you very much.
I have a question.
Okay, I always ask for questions that way, but I do need a second first before you can ask a question. Are you going to second, Director Buss? Thank you. Questions or comments? Yes, Director.
So this is just for my own curiosity because I always I'm always excited about all the things that are happening. So I think this would be something that Mr. Mooney could answer since Mrs. Smith is not here. So the Andrew Goodwin designs for $34,000. What is he designing? What exciting thing?
Yes, thank you, Director Buss. Or sorry, Director.
Sorry. See the sign there?
Sorry about that. So, yeah, so as the board's aware, we approved phase 1 of Conejo Community Center to do parking lot work and to put in the new restroom as well as some other structures, trash enclosure, shade structure and such as part of the CIP. So part of their services would be to get that up and ready for permitting. And so then we would be able to put that out to bid later this year or early next year.
Okay. And the other question I had is, what is Unlimited Engineering doing for $169,000?
What site is it listed under specifically?
All it says is Unlimited Engineering. So I was just curious.
Yeah, Unlimited Engineering is working on 9 sites for us. That's the playground and shade structure contract. So it's either probably Russell Park or possibly Thousand Oaks Community Center shade structure.
Oh, I'm glad that's going at Thousand Oaks Community. So this is basically, they do shade structures and they're doing a variety of shade structures for us right now.
They're doing 1 shade structure and then the 8 playgrounds.
Oh, they're doing the playgrounds also.
Correct.
Oh, okay. Great. Thank you.
All right. Are there any further questions or comments? If not, we have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you very much. I don't believe we have any deferred matters. We don't have any items for discussion. We're going to move along to new items. And the first one up is going to be the annual update to the Conejo Recreation and Park District's Water Conservation Plan. Mr. Mooney.
Thank you, Chair Huffer. This has been going on for quite some time. As per the direction from the board back 2 drought cycles ago, actually, we started doing a lot of different work as it's related to efficiency of our water systems, as well as data tabulation, annual report, as well as the monthly reports that the board receives, as well as some of our water partner and city partners. And so really, this is kind of a highlight item for review and approval. But I know my predecessor did a lot of this work, and I think that's very commendable, as well as staff. I know Matt Kubo was instrumental in the implementation, as well as all of his supervisors out in the field, and then their staff too. So that's just something that all the hard work and the numbers that we'll discuss and review tonight. That's really the, you know, almost 16 years of being very, very water conscious, very forward thinking, getting ahead of the curve and everything. And I was fortunate to be on the backside of those of 8 years of that and been able to implement projects such as Sapway Trails Community Park, most recently Page Lane Neighborhood Park, where we developed a 14-acre park. However, we only did 3 acres of turf. And we actually, as you are aware, we kind of held to do that. So the district, from direction from the board, as well as the administration and the implementation and maintenance and operations of staff, has really made this water report as successful as it is from an implementation standpoint, but then also just the factual data that you all have been aware of for quite some time. But then really it's always good to kind of look back to see where we're at. And so huge strides in our water conservation efforts. I highlighted some of the park development that we've done. And over the years, we've transitioned to like an iCentral system so we can control all of our controllers via a mobile device or laptop or even like a desktop computer, so we can control our systems remotely, which is great. As well as master valves and flow sensors at parks. So when we do have water breaks, because it does happen after hours and such, when staff's not around, there's systems in place where it will shut it down. So we're not wasting water, we're not damaging property, we're not causing issue or safety risk for the public when staff might not be, excuse me, directly on site and being able to do that. So all that stuff's really great. And then just from a number, the first number that I'll throw out at you is, you know, through board approval, we've actually put over $5.5 million into the park system directly related to water savings and directly related to the capital improvements and maintenance operations that we've done. So that's very commendable that, hey, we've actually have gotten ahead of the curve. Like I said, we've been through 2 really bad drought cycles, and we've been able to come out of it in a better place and still providing a great park system for the community. And then one thing that's an annual that we've been doing for quite some time, since 2017, 2018 fiscal year, we've actually put as part of our normal operation procedures is over $250,000 every year towards our drought response projects. So that's a recurring, as well as some of the other larger kind of capital improvements that we've done over the years. And so kind of bigger picture outlook of where we're at. Being in California, the long range climate modeling is showing it's going to be hotter and drier. That's just how it is. We live in more of a coastal desert setting than most people want to think that we are, just because of how developed Southern California is. But the cycle really is, we've been going through some drought cycles. We do have some wet years. We've been fortunate to have a very wet year. We've had over 20 inches of precipitation this past year, as well as, and that's based on our fiscal year, and as well as record snowpack where we get all of our water from, right? So our water source that's coming from there, that supports, and it's potable water. So it's water we drink, water we bathe in, water we irrigate our parks with, fill our swimming pools, all that good stuff. So it's an important resource, and the district has done a great job of continuing to fight the good fight and to do our fair share to be able to provide still a very, very good park system, but then be very water conscious, as well as being fiscally responsible with how we are operating our facilities. Another stat for you, in this past year, 22-23 fiscal year that was just completed, our target is 503 units per acre. And so we are 39.76% below our water target for the whole year. So pretty impressive stuff. And again, going back to the day in and day out operations of staff, making sure that water's turned off when we think, or when there is rain coming, that type of stuff, as well as all the capital that we work into it. And then also we've decreased our water use when comparing consumption back to 2007, when we really started tracking this. Back to 2007, 2008, compared to this past fiscal year, almost 52%. So again, pretty big numbers, pretty impressive stuff. And it's just, we want to continue efforts. That's really our mission and the vision of what we've been doing. We think we can get better And I feel that we can get better with the staffing, the training, the systems in place that we have, and then also the technology that's continuing to grow around us, and then that we're aware of and that we test out in the parks, and then we start to implement at broad range throughout our whole park system. And so there's a couple items of note, like within the report. If you flip to page 58 in your packet, again, I mentioned the historic snowfall this past year. The vertical bar graph shows the 2023 of 677 inches of snow. That is the second most since 1946 that it's been since they've been recording this. So pretty impressive. Just where, hey, we're in a good solid state of our water that's coming to us. However, that doesn't mean that we're going to stop doing what we're doing, that we're going to, you know, kind of sit back and say we're fine. We're going to still be very diligent on how we're operating our park system, what we are looking to do to develop the next park, and looking back to seeing how we can operate our existing parks, right? And then again, kind of an outlook on the following page, on page 59, the seasonal precipitation outlook. Last year we had the same graphic, other than it being for last year. And instead of it being, we're in a 50-50, we're in the white, right, on that map of where we fall. Last year we were in the slightly yellow section. So it's slightly more positive. So that's a good sign. Obviously, there's different folks saying different things, but it is looking like we should have a decent wet winter here, so we can turn the water off. So that's good. We'll see if that happens, because sometimes that doesn't happen, but it does look like that we're in that cycle. And so hopefully we get equal or a good percentage of what we got last year, of that 20 inches locally. And then flipping a little bit further into the report, looking on page 62 of your packet, when it comes down to money, so really looking at what were we spending on money back in 2007 compared to what we just spent this past fiscal year, huge increase. But then when it's 68% increase, but then when you really look at the potable water used, what we're using, a huge decrease, over 46% decrease. And then unfortunately, like a lot of things, expenses are going up. Well, water's no different. Obviously, with availability of water the past few years, that cost per unit has gone up quite a bit, to over 215% increase. And since that, with using those figures, we've saved $7.2 million in what we would have spent if we didn't change what we were doing back in 2007, comparatively, which is pretty impressive. And that's due to the improvements. That's due to the operations of how we've approached, you know, where we live. You know, we live in a more of an arid climate, and a coastal desert, if you will, and we're being responsible with the resources that we have available to us. And then flipping further into the report, on the exhibits of the report, if you go to page 75, it gives a really good overview of how much water we were using per acre. Back in 2007, we were all the way up to 628, and there's some dips and some peaks there a bit. And then since 2014, we've significantly reduced. There's a couple jumps here and there, but also that has to do with depending on how hot and dry it was through winter, as well as certain years we actually gained parkland. So depending on the type of parkland, if it was a little bit heavier in turf or a little bit less in turf, there was a little bit different figure there for the increase of how many units of water we're using. But that's something that's been one of the me professionally and / personally, the responsibility that the district has in the resource of water. It was a significant interest of me being with the district, and that's something that I think shows really through this graphic of what we've been doing and kind of the direction of what we are doing as a district. And so looking at the charts and everything, kind of breaking it down on the next page, on page 76, there's because of so much rain, and again, because of what we've been doing and how we've been going about it, we've saved $1.5 million from looking back to the fiscal year of 2007 to this past year. So again, it's just the proof really is in the numbers on what we have been able to accomplish. and to be able to show within this report and kind of look back on. And with that, I'm available for questions.
Thank you, Andrew. Do we have any questions? Director Lang.
Thank you, and a good report, Andrew, both your verbal and the staff report. There's a number of comments, and I went through this pretty thoroughly because I was involved in the early days of CRPD, making a concerted effort to conserve water and different plans. And one of the first things that came to mind when you made a comment about the automated controllers and et cetera, satellite assistance and so forth. This goes back when I was riding my bike into Wildwood, and the park by Fort Wildwood. I know Fort Wildwood doesn't exist.
Yeah,
anymore.
Wildwood Neighborhood Park.
It is still.
It's a Wildwood Neighborhood Park.
Okay, thank you for reminding me. A sprinkler system, big pipe, had been broken sometime during the night, and it was flooded. I was riding my bike, and I could hardly wait to get the call. I don't know if it was Tom at that time or prior to Tom. And if we would have had these systems that you're talking about, you would have known that there was water flowing and it can take care of it, send somebody out, et cetera. So the investments that you've made in the controlling of water, reporting of water consumption and so forth is really a good thing for sure, and saved us a lot of money. I'll try and keep my questions down, but you talk on the top of page 54 about the modeling, and I think maybe look for other sources, because this does not coincide with what I've been told. In fact, one of the more recent comments was at a VCS, Ventura County Special Districts Association meeting, and I was sitting with a couple of Cayugas board members and I forget who else, that was from a water district, that they definitely talk about wet winters, not only this year with El Nino, two seasons in a row they're forecasting, but there's a lot of information out there that's changing fairly rapidly. I don't know if that's for enhanced, weather forecasting or whatever, but just double check, because some of these pieces of information are not as current as I was told. And one additional input, MRCA Fire Chief always presented the board with forecasts, for the month, and he stopped doing it because they were so far off. So just be aware, as if you don't have enough to do, but there's other resources out there just to double check. And also, I'll just conclude with this one on page 53 about under the fifth bullet, talked about irrigation conversion to reclaimed systems at North Ranch Neighborhood Park and Triumphal Community Park. And after reading through the report, it doesn't look or doesn't appear to be any other parks or open space or whatever, not open space, but that will have the opportunity to get reclaimed water. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah, we're limited on the east side, so the Westlake side of the district, for reclaimed, just because that water provider has the ability for reclaimed. However, the technology of water is shifting and just everywhere, but specifically Southern California, what's going to be common where the water sources are coming from. And so reclaimed is something that the water companies, yes, they will continue to serve what we have now. However, they're not looking to necessarily expand any pipelines and such. We were looking years ago at North Ranch Playfield, but again, they would have to run it about a half a mile. And I forget the figure, but it was $300 to $400 a foot back then. So I don't know what that would cost in this day to run it up the street and retrench and repave and everything. Yeah. So it's substantial capital to be able to get that done.
Agreed. But I'm glad at least we've got two parks with reclaimed water. And possibly I'll come up with additional questions, but for now, that'll be it.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Mooney? Yes, Dr. Cusworth.
Just to continue on with what Director Lang talked about, correct me if I'm wrong. I think that the water that comes out of our treatment plants is reclaimed. It's just not reclaimed here. Doesn't it go out to water fields out in Camarillo and Oxnard?
Correct. Yep. Yeah, and it's the Hill Canyon treatment plant, and the drainage goes that way. And so instead of pumping it up, just historically they've sold it to Camarosa, and so then Camarosa sells it to the farm fields in the Oxnard Plain. Yep.
So even though it's actually not benefiting us, it is still benefiting our county.
Correct.
So, thank you.
Thank you, Director Nichols.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for letting me be a few minutes late. Mr. Mooney, thank you for the report. It's always good to see this report. Whatever the numbers may foretell in any given year, but appreciate the efforts. Just was looking for a little clarification on your table 2 on page 76. Trying to distinguish between unmitigated water use and mitigated water use. Could you help me better understand what the difference is between those two terms?
Sure. So unmitigated water use was it being static from 07, taking a look at 07, and then basing that proportionately on the acreage of development. And so as you can see, as it grows, the number of unmitigated water of units of unmitigated water would grow with it based on the amount of acreage developed with the district. And so our mitigated water use would be the changes that we were making within the capital, within our maintenance operations and such. So if we didn't do anything, didn't change anything, didn't change policy, didn't just operated, kept the parks as green as can be, that is the big difference between unmitigated and mitigated water use. So because taking a look at it when the report was and the data was starting to be collected was in 07. And so then we started making changes to our operations.
Okay.
For that.
So if I could summarize this where I better understand it, then mitigated water use is our current water use, or I should say our actual water use. And unmitigated water use is what it would have been had we not taken the water conservation actions.
Correct.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Andrew, I know a few years ago there have been some discussions, and I don't know if it was you or someone else from the district met with their counterparts of the city, looking at possibility of groundwater use. Has there been anything further on that, or is that not viable? So we occasionally do talk to our partners with the city in public works about that. Currently, it's not a viable option right now. Yeah. Okay. Director Lang, you have 30 seconds.
Thank you, Chair Huffer. And kind of in conjunction with that reporting of Wildwood Neighborhood Park flooding, all night and so forth. On the top of page 68, provide public outreach to inform and educate. And I see some indication that you've got meetings going on, et cetera. Now, can there be a program implemented if necessary, or if you think it'd be effective, of park-specific meetings, go through the neighborhood, maybe in our van, type of thing when we go out to, provide programs for the kids and so forth. Also provide information to the neighbors who may bring their kids to the van, et cetera, about this reporting program. If they walk their neighborhood and see a sprinkler head not working properly or something like that, just to make them aware that part of their responsibility in their neighborhood to, look after their park. Sure. But just a method to really get the public involved to help save water.
Yeah. And staff's always kind of looking at different ways, whether it's, with Rochelle's team with social media, We did very robust signage last cycle in the drought. So that's something that we could take a look at when we do new signs, possibly, you know, or like right now, we're not looking to spend money on signs since water and rain have been good. But as we kind of get back into the situation again, we'll definitely take that in consideration.
Yeah, just thought that it might be another opportunity to keep our neighbors of our parks informed that this
Definitely.
is their park and we need their help too. The extra eyes and ears. Again, great report. I had a lot of fun going through it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any further questions or comments? If not, we are being asked to approve the annual update. I will entertain a motion to that effect. Yes, Director Cusworth.
I make a motion that we approve the annual water update.
Thank you very much.
I'll second that.
Director Lang, second. Any further questions or comments? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much. We will move back to, we had moved item 9C. Director Nichols, just for information, we moved 9C to the top of the action items. So we'll now go to 9A, Quimby fees and park dedication for 500 Thousand Oaks Boulevard. I'm assuming that would be our general manager.
Yes, thank you, Chair Huffer and members of the board. And this is an item involving a to-be proposed development project. It hasn't gone to, as far as I know, it hasn't actually gone to the Planning Commission yet. So we're actually getting an opportunity to look at it and help with the conditioning of the project before it gets there. By a framework, I just want to make sure you guys know we have folks we've been working with from the owner of the property, developer of the property. Chris Marsh is the CEO and Tim Stanley, the head of development. They're with Cherry Tree Capital Partners. And they are the ones who currently control the 500 Thousand Oaks Boulevard and have been working diligently over, at least a couple of years now, I think, with city and us, the Park District, and I'm sure a host of all sorts of other agencies to try to make that project happen. And I think joining them is going to be a gentleman named Darren Shirai. And I apologize, Darren, if I'm not getting your name right. And I believe he's their landscape architect. I do want to provide a little bit of a context or background to Quimby and what that is for the many, 100, 200 people on the Zoom call for us there, Mark. But I know, so I do want to though give a little bit of background and context. And Andrew, if we see the next slide, are we right onto that? Yeah, so the history. So thank you. So I'll talk a little bit about the history, then I'm just going to kick it right over to Andrew Mooney and then again to the developers, owners of the property. So by way of history, I just wanted to bring this up because Quimby's been raised a couple times in recent meetings and questions about what it is and that kind of thing. So the Quimby fees the name is the name of a legislature. It's their last name, who said, hey, you know, anytime there's new residential homes, we should make sure that there's ample and adequate parkland to serve the needs of the future residents of those homes. And a lot of agencies, City of Thousand Oaks included, adopted ordinances to capture that for both subdivisions as well as for apartment projects like this through both, you know, Quimby and Park Impact. So our ability and the way the park system in this community has grown is basically thanks to the developer landowners. They've dedicated the land necessary to build the abundant parks that we do enjoy. Prior to 2015, the way that the Quimby fees had been calculated was basically the fair market value of the land itself. So if a developer of a residential area said, hey, I'm going to develop this land, and we'd say, well, based on the number of residents that are going to be living in these new units that you're building, you're going to have to dedicate X number of parks because we have a standard to meet of a certain number of parkland per population. And so we just look at the fair market value of the land of that project itself. And generally as undeveloped residential land, you know, the land values weren't something that people got a lot of heartburn over. But what changed in 2015 is that the city started to entertain something called the Thousand Oaks Boulevard Specific Plan. And they said, you know what, we want to introduce housing into what was a commercial corridor, you know, commercial areas, and we want to introduce housing into there. And so the issue became housing on the boulevard. If you only look at the underlying fair market value of the land right there, your Quimby fees are jumping, you know, 200, 300%, because that's how much more the land is worth on those commercial corridors. So that was a shock to the system, so to speak. And we were requested by the Thousand Oaks Boulevard Association to kind of look at whether there might be a better way to do that. And we looked at what other communities did. We called a consultant and we worked something out and worked with SCI at the time, and they prepared a report that the board ultimately approved via resolution. And that resolution from 2015 is actually attached to your report right now. So what the board ultimately decided to do is captured on page, and I apologize, I don't have that at my fingertips, page 38 of your packet is the board resolution adopted in 2015. And that said that was a way to solve for the higher cost of housing on the boulevard, to come up with sort of a compromise amount for the fee. So fast forward to now, as you know, the laws around housing have changed dramatically. The city of Thousand Oaks is updating its general plan. It looks like, you know, multi-unit housing is going to be favored in all sorts of parts of town, not just, you know, mixed use commercial, but in office areas, industrial areas, all sorts of locations, because of state policy and the interest of the state in pushing more housing. And I'm not here to debate whether there's certainly a need. I think there is. It's just, you know, the blunt instrument of state laws is being what it is, but that will generate a lot more housing in expensive locations to put future parks. So how to solve for that problem is actually why we're here right now. And I really want to thank the folks at Cherry Tree for working with us and kind of coming up with a proposal to kind of solve this thorny issue of how do we deal with, you know, sort of high fees, but the need for parkland in and very close to the residents that are going to be living in these new areas. So with that long introduction, I am going to hand it over to Andrew Mooney, the Director of Parks and Planning for the Conejo Rec and Park District. So Mr. Mooney.
Thank you, Jim. So really taking a look, this map is done from a trust from public land, and it's their park serve. You can go on the website, type in a lot of different cities throughout the country, but basically, you know, we're park guys, so green is good, right? So green is good, showing vast amount of open space as well as our park system. And so, as Jim mentioned, housing has changed along the boulevard, as well as other with the draft general plan out there now, with industrial and commercial shifting. And so you can really see some of these high priority areas are in traditional commercial and industrial areas, one of which is right here. So this is the location. I'll get a little bigger in the next slide, of 500 Teal Boulevard. And so the battle that we're seeing is trying to find land where new people will be living, right? So from a neighborhood park standpoint, to be able to put parks where people are when it comes to the neighborhood park level, community park, as well as playfield level. And so the purple shows the various shades of purple show the priority of where parks should be based on the Trust for Public Lands mapping. Maps aren't perfect. You know, there are some areas, like you'll see if you zoom into your neighborhood and stuff, they do pick up a little bit more green here and there. They're not perfect. However, and we'll get into it later in the presentation, for the case of this development, it is very accurate where, yeah, we don't have any parks in this area. And so this would be an important location, whether we purchase it, or work with a private landowner, work with another public agency to be able to get some developed park space to serve the neighborhood. And so just north of here, about 3/4 of a mile is Page Lane Neighborhood Park. So there is a neighborhood park within about 3/4 of a mile. However, when you look at the mapping, and again, just to kind of give you guys a little perspective, the project site is a 6-acre parcel. It's currently it's a pumpkin patch. And then during Christmas, it's the Christmas tree lot, right? So it's just I believe it's 2 open vacant parcels. There's some oak trees and such, and some variety of topography between the parcels. However, when you look at this map, the blue dashed outline is the half-mile radius. So our goal is to be able, like the Trust for Public Land, to be able to put people within about 10-minute walk or anywhere from a half mile to 3/4 of a mile to a park. As the boulevard gets more developed, there's already been development down the road at 299. There's other projects in the works, as well as the other industrial and commercial centers throughout town. We're going to further kind of be in a deficit or deficiency within the park system from our acreage standpoint. And I'll get into that a little bit more specifically for this site. But so that's kind of where we're at. It's at the T intersection of Hodenkamp and 1000 Oaks Boulevard is where 500 Teal Boulevard's at. And then it does have one side street of Lombard Street on the west side. And so just to kind of give you highlight, these plans were provided by the developer as conversations over the past 1.5 to 2 years or so, working with their team. But it's a mixed use development, which means that they do have residential as well as commercial on the property. Specifically, they have 328 multifamily units. Some of these are live work, some of them are standalone. And then they do have designated retail as part of their development. They do have typical private amenities, so not available to the public, private, right? It's like an HOA pool, HOA gym, that type of thing. They have a retail plaza that would be private. They would have a dog area that would be private. They have courtyards within the development that would be private, as well as pool and fitness area. The land area that we would be looking at is approximately about 1 acre. It's just shy of 1 acre of quasi-public park space. And it's a linear park up along the boulevard. And so that is about 2/3 of an acre. It would have similar amenities as well as this smaller pocket park, which is about 1/3 of an acre down on Lombard Street. It would have passive public park amenities similar to like our neighborhood parks, a little bit different scale, because these are a little bit more like it would be 2/3 or half the size of a Stella Park, right? So that's a Stella and Suburbia Park are about 2 acres apiece. And so they do have, it's limited space. So the scale of some of the amenities are a little bit smaller. However, we feel that this would be public serving with the amenities of passive seating areas, gathering spaces, game areas, shade. They have 2 large specimen oak trees on the property that would lend itself great for a park. As well as they would kind of develop into the linear park, like a small tot lot, smaller scale playground like we would see at a smaller neighborhood park, as well as some other seating, game areas, and landscaping areas. So definitely something that we would be looking at to develop on our own if we had the land and if we had the financials to do it. And then getting into like where are we at as far as the zoning, or sorry, one more slide with some amenity items. I don't know why that other slide's right there, but you can kind of see some of the character imagery there. Just again, very similar amenities of how we've been developing our parks over time with CRPD. So kind of park need by the numbers, right? So currently master plan, this is in zone 4, same zone as Page Lane Neighborhood Park, planning area 12. Once we built Page Lane Neighborhood Park, we were just at 0, right? We're at deficient 0.7 acres. With bringing in this new project, which would be approximately 670 people for the zoning of multifamily residential, we would be increasing the need for parks 1.67 acres, the neighborhood park need in the neighborhood. So the net parkland need after this project would be built would be 2.37 acres. And then with the dedication as proposed tonight in the recommendation with the quasi-public parkland, we would be gaining approximately about an acre. And so that would bring down our deficiency, that 1 acre, which we think there's value there with it. And then getting into a little bit more of the conditions per the report, walking through the conditions of the report would be, we're looking at a 50% reduction in their Quimby fee. So roughly per this current schedule with the board, it'd be about $4 million, depending on when they pay their fee. If they pay before February 24, it'd be slightly below. If they pay after, it'd be slightly above. And so we're looking at doing a 50% reduction in their monetary fee to the district. And then we would be looking at getting a parkland dedication. So what does that mean? We typically do not own or operate parks this small, right? So a 2/3 acre, 1/3 acre park. And so we've been working with the Cherry Tree team a bit, and staff has kind of has looked through and said, well, if we can get some parkland in a necessary needed area, this would be a very good opportunity for the district and the residents that are there now, as well as those that are coming in. And so we would be, they would still own it. They would still have private ownership of the land. They would be responsible for the park maintenance of it. They would be responsible for the operations of it, as well as any capital improvements over time with the development of. So just like if they were having folks work on their buildings and their landscaping, they would most likely have the same crews and same workers working on the public spaces, or private quasi-public spaces, sorry. And another condition would be that we would be involved, right? They wouldn't just say, hey, we're paving it, we're doing whatever we want. What the goal is that this is serving the public. So we want landscape spaces, we want usable spaces for the public. So myself, as well as Parks and Planning staff, would be involved with the development team as they get through permits, as they get through construction even. We will be working with them to make sure that the plans that you're seeing tonight in concept would be implemented as part of the recommendation. And then the most important one would be, it's private land, but they would be giving CRPD public access for the public to be able to use their private land, park spaces, just as a public park. So they could use it for recreational, they can use it to read a book with their friends, they can use it for walking, whatever the public would want to use, they would be using it during typical operational hours, just like any one of our parks has been for the community. And then also we looked at the opportunity in case, hey, this is something new that we haven't necessarily have done before, and so a termination buyout. So something to protect the district and the public in the long term is if it's not working out for the land manager or the developer, that they would be able to kind of cash out. So hey, if this is an issue, they're having nuisance, disturbance, and issues on the property that we experience throughout the whole park system, since a public space is a little bit different than a private space, then they would have an opportunity to buy us out. However, the buyout that we would propose would be not so much just the $2 million that we would be crediting to the project now. It would be in the time of when they say they would no longer want to provide public access to it, the current rate of Quimby, whatever it may be. So that's one item that we think is fair and important to be able to continue to provide, since if something changes and gives them an opportunity to kind of get out of the agreement. With that. So and then just to kind of highlight, this is a graphic of their design team. So this is the larger linear park along the boulevard. And so just to kind of highlight again some of the features with it, the goal would be, it looks like a public park. You walk right up to it. There's no barriers, whether it's fencing or landscaping, no gates. It's a friendly, comfortable space that if you didn't know it, or you didn't know it was private, you would assume that it's a public park. So that's really the goal, is to be able to provide the space for public use and public access. And so kind of wrapping it up, really district staff thinks this is very important. I know we've had lots of conversations with the public, our partners at the city, as well as developers and yourself, board, with how important it is to continue to be able to provide public spaces. And we need to continue to be creative on how we're doing that. So public-private partnerships such as this, taking a look at our fee structures, taking a look at opportunities of purchasing land. All this kind of gets all put together in this package of being able to continue to provide for an increasing population in the city. So with that, unless Mr. Friedel, you want to add anything, or if we want to give Cherry Tree, if they would like to make a few comments, that concludes my presentation.
I don't have anything else to add. And I suppose if this were an actual like development permit type hearing, I guess the opportunity would be to now ask staff any questions you want of staff, and then of course have the opportunity for Cherry Tree to let us know anything we maybe haven't covered.
Okay, do we have any questions for staff? Dr. Cusworth?
A couple of things. So I'm assuming Cherry Tree is online. They hear us?
Yes.
If they're okay with that, it'd be nice to see somebody I'm talking to. So what I was going to say was, since you've been talking with them and they're here at the presentation, I'm assuming that this is all agreeable to them. The 50% cut in the Quimby fees, and that they're going to be taking care of it, and it'll all be open to the public.
That is correct.
This is something that they have agreed to.
But it'd be great if we get them on.
Yes, this is, I'm sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
This is Tim Stanley representing Cherry Tree. My business partner, Chris Marsh, is also listening, as well as Darren Shirai, our landscape architect. So if we're promoted appropriately, we can speak on behalf. But yes, we've reviewed the agreement, and we find it, we are enthusiastic about moving forward with it.
Okay, so that's wonderful. I'd like to say that we bought our first home very near that area, and there was many times I wished I could have taken my young children over to a park. So I think that this is a fabulous project to have right there on the boulevard. One of my concerns as a mother when I had young children is that there's not going to be any fencing, and that's a very busy boulevard. I guess this wouldn't be something where you would throw a ball or be doing anything. Is safety a concern about not having any fencing around the area?
Well, I would say, and I'll let Darren Shirai chime in a little bit, but the thought was to have we have two parks, right? We have a linear park, and we have a let's say a more passive park, which is along Lombard Street, which is a more quieter enclave of sorts. And in that area, there is fencing because there is children's play structures that is contemplated. Now, of course, nothing has been approved by the Parks Department at this point, but from a safety perspective, we felt that we programmed the site as appropriate to the level of activity of the streets that it faces. And I see Darren has joined us, so I'm going to let him, he's much better about speaking about this than I am. So go ahead, Darren.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Darren Shirai, the landscape architect on this project. Conceptually, what we're thinking of along Thousand Oaks Boulevard, because of the safety issues that you had mentioned, of keeping that mostly passive. It's a walking park. There's gardens envisioned. It's seating. And then the play component would be along Lombard Street, which is a quieter street from a traffic circulation perspective. And as an additional measure of safety, if we could pull up the site plan of that park, what we're proposing around the play area for little kids is a small fence, a low fence, and then around the entire park, it would be a controlled access play area, and specifically because we have child safety in mind. And so the Lombard Street is programmed specifically for young children and teenagers, as well as it's multi-generation recreation, but the primary focus for the programming there would be for young children and teens.
And Darren, just so you know, the board here does have two 11x17s in front of it. The one depicting both linear park and the smaller children's area park, but then one kind of highlighting the smaller. So if you look at 11 by 17, you can kind of see what they're thinking there.
Yeah,
Okay.
I did look at those. I just wanted to question the developers on that and see that you had taken safety in mind. And that I think that the Lombard Street, yes, from what you've said, that is a very quiet street. So I don't think there would be much danger there. I had another question just to clarify the buyback. So if it's decided that it doesn't work and you don't want to, I guess, maintain the park anymore, or does that mean that it will no longer be a public park, or is the city, or is rather Conejo Recreation Park buying back from you, or are you paying the additional Quimby? I mean, I just wanted to clarify that. So either Mr. Mooney or one of these gentlemen for the buyback option.
Yeah, and I can take that, guys. It's not so much a buyback, it's like a buyout. So this is private land that is going to be operated in a quasi-public manner just because it's privately managed and owned. So the land never exchanges hands from private development to the district. It would just be a public access and recreational use easement over the land. And so that would be as far as the exchange goes. So it would be, if it doesn't work, right, that it would just be a buyout and a termination kind of clause in the conditions of the agreement that, hey, this isn't working. They might, in 10, 15, 20 years, maybe laws change and they can do something different with the property, and they're changing the property to some other type of development. But then again, to protect the district and from a fiscal standpoint, that we don't lose credit from that they can buy out, and basically instead of providing the public or quasi-public accessible land, they in turn will then give us the fee that's due to the district at the current rate of that termination.
Okay, so that would just basically mean that it would no longer be a public park.
Correct.
Okay.
Again, it's quasi-public, meaning that it's a private park that allows public access to.
I'm talking about if we had the buyout, it would no longer be a public park.
Correct. It would no longer be publicly accessible. Yes.
Okay, that was what my question was. And how does it go with insurance if the public is using private land as the park?
It would fall under the landowners.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Okay. Thank you very much.
Other questions, Director Lang?
Yeah, I just want to piggyback on Director Kessler's concern. Could you pull up the very first rendition of the park? When I first saw this, I immediately thought of the lakes. So the lakes doesn't have fences around it, et cetera. It's not an active playground. It's
Director Lang, is that image good, or do you want the actual 2D plan?
No, this is perfect. But it reminds me of the lakes kind of thing with the park, and they have the water features, et cetera, in front of the retail in the back. But I was just trying to correlate the concern, correlate the use with the parks between the street and the buildings, and that I don't share any concern like you were. I can understand, mentioning those concerns, but I again picture this just like the lakes, and which doesn't have any fencing or any of that.
No, I can understand that. The playground at the lakes is way away from the street. It's quite a ways from the street. Then this looked like it was right on the street. But the fact that they said that there's no playground equipment on that site, I just wanted to clarify that, because the lake's playground equipment is way back by the retail, and there's like a stream, and there's bridges, there's quite a bit. But I just wanted to clarify with the developers that safety had been thought of, and they did clarify that this is more of a passive park where people are walking around, so it's just greenery really, and that the other one they are put on the Lombard. I saw that. I just wanted to clarify it. That's all.
Thank you. Other questions, either of staff or the developer? Yes, Director Nichols.
I do have some questions and comments, but I didn't know if the developer had anything prepared to say other than what was other being just available for questions. I don't know if you were anticipating them to provide a presentation as well, or was that it?
They're free to make a statement if they would like, but they weren't looking to make a presentation.
All right. Well, Mr. Stanley, if you had something to say, I'd be curious to hear it. Otherwise, we can certainly ask questions and make comments, and then you can respond whatever your preference is.
I'm happy to answer any questions at this point. The presentation was accurate, and I have nothing meaningful to add.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Well, I do have some things I'd like to share. First of all, I just want to thank staff and the development team for being creative. I know we're in this position in our community and also with our park district where we don't have a whole lot of options as far as land availability, and creativity is going to be a primary way of getting things done. So thank you for that. And also, I certainly support the city's efforts in trying to move projects forward, and I'd like to think that this park district continues to be a good partner with the city and also with the development community. But I do have some concerns, and it's not so much for the project, but kind of like the precedent that may be before us as far as a part of this. And I know with the park district currently considering Quimby fees, as we had on our agenda a short while ago, and are continuing to assess that. It's a critical factor for us as far as how we're moving forward. And I noticed that with this particular project, as we saw with our presentation, anticipating about 670 residents, which the demand would be, so to speak, as you said, about 1.7 acres, and this is a little bit less than that. But obviously, we would greatly appreciate having the necessary funds or actual park land to make that happen. But as we look at these little incremental parks, and my concern is, is this going to set a precedent where now future development along the boulevard will see this as the standard to meet as we go forward with future projects? So I'm a little bit concerned with that, because I don't know that I want to go down that path for fear of this being now by default the way everything else is going to be viewed as what they need to do in the future. And since we really don't have a pocket park definition or an urban park definition, and our minimum size is 5 acres, and we have nothing less than that, and I know we have talked about perhaps defining what that might be for the boulevard or other densely populated areas, is what would be our expectation of these types of parks. And I think this gives a good example of what that could be, but we certainly haven't created a policy per se as to what we would expect for that. And so that's also a concern of mine, is this is a good option, but I don't know that this would be what we should tell everybody else to do if that's going to be where we're headed. So that also is a concern of mine. With this particular project, I've noticed that with the linear park right along the boulevard, that in essence, there are 2 large native oak trees which need to be preserved by city ordinance regardless. And oftentimes, if those were incorporated within a development itself, they may have some type of protected fencing around the drip line, which is a city standard. And if that were to be the case, as far as that being a usable park, to me, I think it's about 1/3 of an acre is actual usable area. So I think we're kind of doing them a favor, is almost what it sounds like, is calling it a park, but it's really not a park. It's protected trees that have to be protected anyhow. And even if it weren't in the park, they would still be protected. So there's nothing gained per se from that. And then the other thing I wanted to point out is, and this is more with the resolution itself regarding Quimby fees that we currently have on the books. I just wanted to, I don't know if it's pointing out or reminding or indicating that when that resolution was passed, at the time, the city was still underneath their Measure E restrictions as far as the number of units that could be developed throughout the city. And I think at that point, the maximum number was, I'm guessing 200 or 300 at most. That's all that was left in the bank. And so as far as any development was concerned, the most that we were anticipating was 200 or 300 units. So when that resolution was passed, and I know Chair Huffer was here at the time, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you can speak to that if you care to. When that was anticipated, it's like, okay, there's a certain amount of funding that we could benefit from those 200 or 300 units, but not knowing where or when that would be. So reaching some type of a compromise for a Quimby fee, which was amenable to the development community, seemed reasonable. And we also knew that there was a certain endpoint. There was only going to be a certain amount. Well, in the intervening years, we now have a general plan that could come up with potentially 10,000 or more units or residents. Who knows how many units actually. We're still waiting for a final general plan. And so with that resolution made with the anticipation of a certain number of units and only a certain amount of funding that was going to be affected, now it's dramatically changed. And so we're going to have a tremendous impact on that. And on top of that, the dollar per acre value during that resolution was about $1 million. And currently we're over $3 million. So the times have dramatically changed. And I don't necessarily say this to put a burden on this development project or on this proposal before us. But as I kind of said from the beginning, my concern is the precedent that it sets, especially when we are currently discussing and considering Quimby fees. I don't want to go down a pathway where now other future development projects are looking at this as the way to address it. And now we're kind of putting ourselves in a corner. So that's my concern. Again, not so much the project. I think it's a nice design project. I think it does well for that particular location. We will miss the pumpkin patch, but we'll find another way to deal with that. But that's my concern. Is more, where does this point us in the future, having not yet concluded that Quimby fee potential and what it might set us up for. So that I just kind of put that out there for discussion.
I'm going to jump in at this point, since you referenced my history with this old resolution, that unless I'm mistaken, the resolution applies specifically to building along that was encompassed by the Thousand Oaks Boulevard specific plan. It would not, to the best of my knowledge, it would not include, say, the Kmart development or the development down closer to Westlake High School, the area around Westlake High School, proposed developments in the at least discussions about residential development in the Oaks Mall and other areas other than the Thousand Oaks specific plan. That, correct me if I'm wrong, but that the resolution that we passed in 2015 is specific to the Thousand Oaks Boulevard specific plan.
So actually, the focus was on the Thousand Oaks Boulevard specific plan, but what ultimately happened was they said, if we're going to give this sort of adjusted, Quimby rate in here, we should make it available to everybody. So one of the whereas's clauses basically says, whereas the board of directors also desires to allow all other property owners within the district seeking to construct multifamily residential to choose whether to pay a fixed Quimby in lieu fee per the attached schedule or the Quimby in lieu fee as calculated in accordance with the city's Quimby ordinance, as it may be amended from time to time. And Andrew, you could correct me if I'm wrong, but I think every single person, it's basically you can choose the calculation per the formula that's in the code or the calculation per the resolution. And in every instance, they've chosen the resolution
to my knowledge,
because it makes it cheaper. But what really we're talking about isn't so much the fee and this resolution. It's really the city's code. The Quimby ordinance actually contemplates this scenario, this quasi-public land private land, sort of, if you basically provide enough robust amenities on the private property that satisfy what otherwise is a park demand, the developer can do exactly what this developer's done, which is say, hey, is there a way I can kind of beef up what I would normally just give to my residents and make it available to everyone in the public and get a little bit of credit for that. And I understand Director Nichols' concern. This is a first. We have not done this. This is a new thing. It certainly hasn't been done in my time, and I don't know that the district's ever done it, because in historical past, we've always really been dealing with subdividers and, you know, big tracts of land. So big multifamily projects have not been something that this community's really wrestled with until now. But until now, the state laws have changed to make it much more, the city, the park, we're not really in the land use business, so we're kind of agnostic there, but the city has a lot more difficulty wrestling with multifamily because there is such a favored status for multifamily in state law now. So part of our thinking here is, we know this is a very park deficient area. We know, so therefore we know the public would really benefit by having some access to open space in this very area. So working with Cherry Tree, we felt like if we were going to try this getting out of the gate, if they're willing to give the public access to 1 acre out of their 6 acres, that's a pretty good initial starting precedent in terms of working with future projects down the line. So we felt like this was actually a pretty strong way to come out of the gate as we kind of wrestle with what this might mean in other parts of town over time. And by the way, the split, actually, there's a rationale to the split. So 50% of the Quimby fee is for a neighborhood park, and the other 50% is for the playfield community district-wide parks. Like, that's how it's in the code. So what that sort of does is say, you know, half that money really should be spent very close to the development project at hand, because people should be able to walk to a public park near them. The reason to kind of hold on to the other half of the Quimby fee, the reason we want to get some money out of this as well, is because we still have to provide these future residents in this with places that have sport courts and fields and community centers and pools and senior centers and teen centers. So all the other stuff we do, that's what we can use this other Quimby for. And to the extent there's a deficit built in, because, you know, as the community builds out with the general plan, it will be very hard to keep up with the acreage per population. We'll give it a, you know, college try, and we'll keep trying to do it with each and every project. But frankly, it's not going to be possible. But one thing we could do with this extra $2 million is we could look for land to purchase in that area as well. So I know there's a piece of property across the street from this right now that's available for $5 million. It's got all sorts of challenges, but there's a piece of property across the street basically being offered for $5 million. So this is the kind of future we're going to face here as we get more and more multifamily proposed. So those are my comments on Chair's concern about whether this is multifamily is only on the boulevard. It's really all over.
Okay, my misunderstanding. Dr. Cusworth.
Okay, I have one question. We do have private parks that have community access, such as the lakes and Gardens of the World. Do we consider those into our park average of deficiencies?
So we do not incorporate those figures in the current master plan. That's something that staff has reviewed and we might take in consideration. Just similar to this, is since it would be part of the CRPD park family, however, not owned and directly operated by the district. That would be something that we would take a look at the numbers moving forward, but those are accounted in a section of the current master plan, but I believe they are not incorporated into the deficiencies.
Yet we would be including this park that's on private land into the deficiency.
correct, because this would be a direct easement with Conejo Recreation Park District and Cherry Tree for public access easement versus a general private or nonprofit or city that's offering private park space like the lakes and the nonprofit that operates the Gardens of the World.
Does the city have any parks that are being actively used? I know that used to have one on Green Meadow, but I think they just turned that into dirt chips, so it's not usable anymore. Does the city have any parks that are usable for public use that we're not considering in part of the percentage?
There is one off of Jan's. I don't know the exact title of the property, but that is like it's a smaller kind of pocket neighborhood grass area that is actually owned by the city. It's part of the right of way there. So, and again, that's something that staff is looking through when we're updating our master plan, and we'll kind of take a little bit broader look at what's being counted, what's not being counted, that type of thing.
And then in reference to what Director Nichols was saying, with setting precedent, I think that this is something that we should talk about. And if we, look in the news or look into any of our trade magazines with Park and Rec and Park, this is becoming a large issue of urban parks and pocket parks. And Thousand Oaks historically had pocket parks. And then they made the decision, many years ago to no longer have pocket parks. And maybe we're going to have to make the decision to have them again. And that's something that a lot of cities are looking at, like what makes a good small park, which we did talk about one time. And I remember I went and looked at a park near the school where I used to work in Woodland Hills, which I think Director Bush went to a birthday party there.
It's an old fire station.
Yeah. So, I mean, no, I wouldn't say it was a magnificent park, but if you're just trying to get the kids out of the house and go someplace different to play or have a picnic or have a birthday party, those things would be very nice. And I can say that when I did live in that neighborhood, I used to take my kids to an office building and have them walk around a fountain. Now, going to this park, on Lombard would have been a lot nicer, because sometimes if you've got little kids, you're not always wanting to have them pile into the car and take them somewhere. You just want to go for a walk. And so I can see, as a resident who at that time was a young mother, I would have utilized that park. So I think that it's something we need to discuss if we want to make some policies, if we want to move further on, what requirements would be. This could be something for future discussion. Absolutely.
Thank you, Director Lang.
Yes, on the topic of pocket parks, there is one right on Moody Court in Teal Boulevard that was created by the city, not the park district. And
That's the one I took my kids to.
Yeah, there was a little water feature that they eliminated because of the drought. They stopped using the water feature, but it's generous to call it a park, so to speak. It's a triangle in kind of the median between two streets, but it's a landscaped area. It's a nice landscaped area. It
was identified as a pocket park, by our park district when the city created it. Another thing, if you'd pull up one of the first slides on the area that this development serves, it was the circle. Well, where I'm going with this is our Rolling Oaks property across the freeway.
Correct.
That would be included in this geographic area, right? As far as park efficiency, et cetera.
Currently, it would be included. There obviously is a big barrier, an 8-lane highway of the 101 coming through there. And so your current only legal pedestrian traffic would be from Moore Park Road or Rancho Road. So the disconnect is pretty mighty to be able to get Teal Boulevard residents or future residents from 500 Teal Boulevard to Rolling Oaks. But technically, per the master plan, it falls within the current zone.
Tunnel.
Yes, Director Buss.
So I have to say, I think that the linear park is beautiful curb appeal, and I'm really impressed with it. Coming from real estate. I just think that it'd be really sad for the boulevard to have these massive multifamily projects that didn't have this green space. So I think that's awesome. I also think having had small children and always living within walking distance to somewhere to put them in a swing and swing them, that having the park here is amazing for kids that, you know, are younger all the way up. And then you have the front park where, hey, if you're a teenager and you want to get out of your, you know, apartment with your family, you have somewhere to go and sit and be outside. So I'm not saying that I think this should be a precedence for everything, but I think that this is really well done to make it look like a really beautiful green place to live. I love the trees in the middle, all of it. So I think you guys did a great job.
Thank you. I do have a couple of comments. One, yes, this could possibly set a precedent. I certainly agree with that. But I'm not convinced that this would necessarily be a bad precedent if we have, as Director Cusworth suggested, some policies as to how we're dealing with smaller pocket type parks. As has been pointed out, the Park District really can't afford to buy land anywhere. The existing parks that we have, we'd be hard pressed to add land to what's already there, because I'm sure there must be some parks somewhere where there's a little additional land that we could add, but most of them are surrounded by either residential or commercial or something, so those parks couldn't be expanded. We could add some facilities to existing parks, which might help, but it wouldn't do anything to our acreage per thousand population. The only real source for additional land are the private landowners who are either buying or have already purchased these properties for future development. And if we were to set up policies or procedures for any future developments, if it's the developers who have the land, if we could get them to agree that a certain portion of their land would be dedicated to, yes, small parks, but it's better than no park at all. And as Director Buss pointed out, for the little kids, just to have a little bit of green space where the kids, excuse me, where the kids can run around is certainly better than nothing. My feeling is that, yes, we do need to have some policies in place, not necessarily for this specific project, but there are other projects in the planning stages. And if the developers are willing to dedicate a usable portion of land, not a few hundred square feet or something, but a, 3/4 of an acre or something like that, certainly better than nothing. And I think the idea of having the developers who own the land make some of that land available might be the direction to go, again, with proper procedures and guidance. So, Director Lang?
Yes, not a big thing, but I'm sure the developers will communicate in whatever agreements they sign with the future occupants, in their agreements to rent the apartments, et cetera, that they're aware that this is a public-private environment, such that they wouldn't get upset when they see somebody that's not in their complex using the parks and so forth. I'm sure that's all standard procedure for you guys that communicate that, just to make sure there's no hiccups in the future.
Yeah, no, we take no exception to providing the necessary notification to future residents, as well as just signage that would be available out on the property that makes it very clear from the get-go that this is, and that will be discussed with the Parks Department to make sure it's adequately signed in the way that makes sense.
Good, thank you.
Do we have any? Yes, Director Nichols.
A question, Mr. Stanley, is this a time-sensitive issue for you?
Yes, it is, in that we are, and just a couple of, probably points of information. Our application is into the city. We are going through, we're going through the planning department process. We expect to be in front of the planning commission early next year. That's what's been communicated to us by the city. We are in the process of right now negotiating the documents in order to have that happen. And this piece is part of that. There'll be a development agreement on this project, and this issue will be part of that agreement that is part of that document. So it is rather time sensitive.
Okay, thank you. And then I don't know if our staff has this readily available or could estimate it, but if this agreement were based on current land values, what would that dollar amount be as far as that 50-50 arrangement?
Sure. I can take this one.
Okay.
So land value is tricky, right? As you mentioned that, hey, there's oak trees on the property. There's also a drainage easement and things like that over the property. So by our estimates, and it's anywhere from 1.1 million an acre all the way up to possibly over 3 million an acre, as well as the cost to develop, right? So to develop the property, as well as annual or monthly maintenance costs, right? So working through that, our park system's a little bit different because you're kind of packing in a little bit more fun and amenities in this 1 acre park site. But running the numbers from our maintenance and what it costs to maintain, we're roughly depending on the park, we're about anywhere from 12 to high teens to possibly 20s, depending on the park site, annually, to be able to maintain 1 acre, right? But again, that's a little bit different where you have your how much turf, how much space, it's laid out differently in a larger 5 acre property and such. So our best estimate, it could be anywhere from like 18 to 20,000 possibly annually, just to maintain and staff and utilities and other things on this property. But again, depending on what amenities, the final design, all that good stuff, that number can obviously go up quite a bit. So there's definitely some value there compared to the 50% discount from the approximate $4 million fee.
Okay, I guess maybe I didn't phrase my question correctly. I was thinking of the Quimby fee at $12,000 a unit. I know is based on a predetermined dollar amount for land value, which I think in the resolution it says it's just over $1 million.
Correct.
But I think the current land value is 3 times that. So if that were to have been used in the calculation, what then would be that 50% amount that they would have to pay?
Well, let me take that. So this, if we did the $1 million that's in the resolution from 2015, that was a solution that grabbed fair market value throughout the community to kind of blend it to come up with the 1 million an acre. We basically used the same consultant to do the same study. We actually had a different appraiser, but if I remember right, what you guys had on your agenda maybe 3 meetings ago included the appraisal report that I think justified an overall land value to base the Quimby fee calc on at like 1.3 something. 1.35. So that's what the most recent appraisal would, if we did the same, like what we call like flat rate appraisal, not the custom project by project appraisal. Project by project appraisal, if a $3 million underlying fair market value for the fee would probably be closer to 30,000 instead of 12. But that public policy decision we made, in 2015 to say, it just makes more sense to kind of have a more reasonable blended rate, not hit them so hard because they're buying such expensive land, but say, if we were to spend this money even half a mile away, like if we were to spend this money on the other side of the freeway, we could have bought in 2 Rolling Oaks neighborhood parks. It's just such a hyper local cost. So it's hard to actually say what say the right fair market value to use. I believe it's not, I don't think a big secret, but I think they have secured the property at about 3 million an acre if they were to have to buy it. So that's what they're willing to pay to do the project they're doing on it. So, you know, one of those 3 acres is going to be dedicated to a quasi-public park, albeit not the most valuable of those acres, but certainly. So there's a lot of more art than science, I think, to the appraised value of what this acre is worth.
Okay. And then kind of perhaps reflecting on the chair's comments as well, and also the Director Buss said whether it's setting a precedent or not. Again, I'm voicing those concerns. I don't know how many others would feel that same way, but I think what would, I guess, alleviate some of my concerns, because I certainly don't want to put a kibosh on this developer. I agree with Director Buss. I think it's a well-designed project. You know, carving out what needs to be carved out and trying to, you know, work it well within the restrictions that they have. And I saw that there's a flood control area as well. So a lot of challenges on the site. But with some of the considerations that Mr. Mooney was outlining as to how they got to this point, I think would be a good draft of the considerations for the future. You know, whether it be a percentage of the site, you know, the access that it's going to provide, the dollar value, some of those criteria that could be set forth that perhaps could become something for the future if this were to become a standard per se. My concern is we're not there yet. And, you know, maybe this is maybe not going to be the exact formula per se that we use, but I would like to request that staff were to put something like that together, as I do believe this will be moving down the road, literally down the boulevard, as something to look at, say, hey, maybe we should consider what they did. And I think we need to have some guidelines for that. And I think we probably got the essence of it here. Perhaps wasn't really considered it in that regard as to how it was going to play out. But I think if we could kind of use that, and I don't know if there needs to be some refining or whatever, perhaps, you know, with the development process. I know obviously Mr. Stanley and his team has to get before the Planning Commission and perhaps even City Council to go through with this. So I know they still have some bugs to work out, but I think if we could use this as perhaps something that'll help us down that pathway, I would feel better about it, knowing that we're going to kind of use this and say, okay, this is kickstarting us because we have to do it. It's not something that we can kick down any further. We've got to get it started. So that would be my request from staff. And if the board were to agree with that, say we've got to have something before us that's a little more formal rather than just looking at each project as it comes. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
If I could make a suggestion, and please tell me if I'm out of line on this, but the staff recommendation that we'd be voting on does refer to the subject project, so it only apply to this project. But perhaps if you were willing in making a motion to approve this, that there be some language in the motion that would embody your request for staff to use this as a starting point for putting together guidelines, policies for any future projects. That basically, I'm certain there would be other developers who could say, well, they did it, why can't we do it? That if we have some policies in place before we consider any future projects, that would make sense.
I would be happy to make such a motion, but I would want to make sure that if any other board members have comments, they get those in here.
Director Lang?
Yes, talking about precedents, and I think that's a good idea, Doug. We're at the starting point and we got to do the best we can with what we've got. But I don't know if Andrew or Jim or any staff checked with other rec and park districts and or organizations, national organizations, et cetera. Are there any other communities that are already jumped into this and dealing with these things that we're working on with this development?
Certainly. I mean, yeah, certainly. There's you know, just if you want to look hyper local, obviously Santa Monica, Pasadena, you know, these comparable suburbs around LA that have maybe they're 50 years ahead of us and have had to develop and try to figure out how to supply smaller pocket parks. So I think there's probably places we can go to kind of analogize and think about, you know, how did they do it and how did they get to where they're at? I think that's absolutely something, you know, we can use to kind of create. Again, staff is maybe we didn't have a template or a policy or a like standards or criteria to kind of think through, like a checklist or something to go through to do this. I think I will say some of the compelling reasons to want to do it is we knew this was like a very identifiable park deficient, very specific location that had a park deficiency in our town. That sort of, you know, kind of lent itself to saying we really could benefit by having additional parkland, not just for this new multifamily apartment where they could theoretically just fence all this off and say, this is what our residents want and need, and this will be their private space. But by kind of requiring it to have the public access, all the units around there too will benefit, you know, the existing homes plus, you know, 299 just got built right there, a big apartment project right across the street. So we think it's a great location. If I could have my wish, I'd let them go to 8 stories tall and I would have taken 3 acres and made a great park. But the city's not going to let them go to 8 stories tall. That would be a whole different, you know, project and that kind of thing. But with the land that's available, partly it's available because of actual physical constraints, oak trees and drainage things. It's a kind of a unique situation, and this does lend itself to sort of a unique solution. I will share that you know, normally the board isn't involved in what we do with the city when it comes to conditioning. We just submit our conditions. We just, hey, we need to get paid our Quimby fees, or if there is some component to a park, we give them our conditions. It's just what staff at Parks and Planning does. But because we know this is unusual, this is very different, we wanted this board to have an opportunity to see the kind of conditions we would propose to the planning staff to kind of include. And the planning staff still has the opportunity to kind of think through things we might missed or didn't think through and kind of work that with the developer before this gets to the final version. But I think we have kind of the bulk of it thought through and covered. But yeah, no, this is a different and hard kind of thing to wrestle with. And every project I know is unique. Kmart, the Kmart site, IMT development, they proposed to do this very thing and we declined because the way that their park space was laid out wasn't really conducive to the general public actually using it. When you looked at their design and their site layout, you're like, no, the public is not going to go through this maze to get to this little spot in the back. Or they had already predetermined that they had a very specific kind of park use that we might not have chosen. For example, like I think they had a half-acre off-leash area as a component. And although a good project with a really great amenity, we just didn't see any of that as true public park assets to the general public for us to give them credit on the Quimby. So this is the unique and first project we're recommending to this board that we do this with.
Okay, my question would be, would staff have any heartburn with a motion to approve the recommendation with the additional requirement that staff work on sooner rather than later on a policy or something similar to this to come to staff, so that we're not having to necessarily recreate the wheel each time one of these comes along?
Absolutely. No, I think that's absolutely something we can work on, like a sort of a, when to say yes and when to say no when it comes to, we want to give you this piece of property that it's easy if it's, meets our park standard of 2 acres or more. That's okay. We know what to do with that. We know how to build a 2-acre park and we know how to manage and work that out. But if generally it's less than that or kind of really unusual in size or location, we absolutely can start to work on some kind of a criteria or thought process for how to go about analyzing that.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Director Cusworth.
I think that this recommendation is really asking that we authorize the staff to submit the proposed development conditions to the city staff for the subject process as conceptually outlined in this report, which I think most of us think that this is a good project and that we are willing to go forward on it. I don't think that we need to add any conditions to this for the staff. I would recommend that we put it as a deferred matter, that within a time period that the staff is going to look at this and make some policies. I really don't even know what this is, since this is our first one. You usually learn from when you've gone through something. So I don't even know if at this point it's going to benefit us within just a month or so to all of a sudden come up with policies if we haven't even gone through the process. It seems to me that it would be better for us to kind of go through the process, see how this works out, take out the good, maybe the bad. We're still going to have to look at every project individually, and they'll be different. So my recommendation would be, let's just approve this. Whether we agree or not, let's vote on this project. And then I would say as a deferred matter, that we should be looking into how we want to proceed with these situations in the future. I don't think the two really need to be aligned. I'm just not seeing the need for that myself.
Are you making that in the form of a motion?
Okay, so I will recommend that we authorize the staff to submit the proposed development conditions to the city staff for the subject project as conceptually outlined in the report.
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion, Director Lang?
Yes, on your point, Director Cusworth, maybe you can bring up on your item 12, request for status reports and items for subsequent agendas.
Perfect.
Are there any further comments or questions? No, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
And
Thank you very much for joining us this evening, gentlemen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good luck at the planning commission.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Appreciate your support. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, item 9B, City's Development Impact Fee Deferral Program. Mr. Friedel.
So another big new, well, I don't know if it's big, but it's a new thing for the board to wrestle, and it's obviously related to what we just talked about. It's how we are able to meet the needs of future residents as they, come into town when new projects are. So this is something that was just on the city council agenda on October 10th. I stayed up until later than I wanted to and watched the staff report and the discussion. It was it was after 11. I think it was pretty late when they got to it. So there wasn't a ton of discussion outside of what you see here, other than a lot of wholehearted support from the council. And I think they unanimously voted in favor of this. So the city's memo speaks for itself. I guess I would elaborate on what my recommendation is for the park district. So what the city is saying is that we know that we have approved and are likely to approve some projects in the recent past and very near future that are prepared to pull their building permit. And because of the rapid escalation in interest rates, some projects that once seemed extremely feasible just 12 or 18 months ago have all of a sudden become economically questionable and might not be, under construction in as quickly as everyone had anticipated. And really, it's an economic development sort of, mindset is that, we've done all the work, we've gone through all the hearings, we've approved these projects. And now, because of kind of unforeseen rapid escalation in interest rates, the construction loan funding for some of these is getting to be problematic. So is there a way to make it a little more feasible for a developer to say yes, pull the trigger, and actually start some construction. So what the city is recommending is that they take their own city development impact fees. You can see they have 10 different impact fees. And just added in number 11, if I read the Acorn right this morning. So the city is going to say, look, you don't have to pay your impact fees at the time of pulling your building permit. We are going to let you defer that payment until the certificate of occupancy, which could be 12 months to 2 years, kind of ballpark is, 1 to 2 year time window. When you pull the building permit, you take out a construction loan to build maybe a $200 million project. That's a big loan, right? So every point of interest savings you can shave is great. So if you can defer your impact fees, you don't necessarily have to borrow against that part of the money and pay that later. And what the city is saying is that we are going to look at what the 5-year US Treasury rate is at the time that the building permit is pulled, and apply an interest rate at the time that will accrue until their certificate of occupancy is issued. So for example, the US Treasury right now is, I think 5-year US Treasury was at 4.4% when I last looked online. So what that would mean for us is like, hey, we're going to pull our building permit. I know we'd give you a check for $1 million for Quimby right now, but we don't want to do that. We're going to ask for this deferral. And we'd say, okay, well, it'll defer, but it's going to accrue interest at 4.4% until you pay at your C of O. So in a way, we actually make a little money on it. What we do is lose our ability to do a capital project right then with that dollars. But one thing that we can do, at least, if the numbers get really big, we can't do it. But if we're talking, probably under $5 million or so of total fees, we can actually borrow against interfund loans or reserves to pull the trigger, do the project, knowing that in 12 to 24 months, they're going to write us the check for the fees. So we can still move forward if we have a project that so is dependent on that impact fee. We could still go forward with the project. The developer would save a little tiny bit of money, but 1% on $100 million is a percent we're saving, right? And we can still go and do our capital projects and ultimately know we're going to collect that fee. So I think that's the concept behind it. I would say that the city's interest is, again, in kind of letting those projects that are right at the starting gate, but the developers kind of really hand-wringing and might not do it, and it might not happen for years out. It's to kind of let stuff cut loose and show that they're a community, wanting to see that those approved projects go forward. So, so my recommendation is to kind of, let's say, play nice in the sandbox with the city and defer just like they would. And I don't really want to create a whole new CRPD separate standalone program. My thought would be to work with the finance staff at the city and just say, hey, whatever your application process and fee deferral, like written agreements are and stuff like that, and you're going to have all your fees listed on there, just add our fee to the list and we'll acknowledge that that is the case and kind of keep the paperwork really simple. So that's what that is.
I'm going to start with Director Buss. She was sort of almost raising her hand, so.
So I think that this is actually a really great idea for us to be able to work with the developers. The impact of these interests on these development deals is huge. And I think it's great that we're actually going to be making interest though as well. But for them, I mean, when you're looking at construction loans and bridge loans right now, you're at, easily 9.5%. So I can see why they want to pay even a 4.5% interest on the money to save that extra 5% interest over that time. So I definitely am in favor of that. I think that potentially taking loans to do other projects is something that it would depend on the economy's state and interest rates, because I would worry that some of these projects potentially, if interest rates, God keep going up, then they'll might take longer than say 2 years to build, depending on it. So, and especially if construction costs went up. So that's kind of my take on it. But I really think that this is a huge benefit and really shows that we are trying to work with the developers, and hopefully they will see that and appreciate that for future reference.
Thank you, Director Lang.
Yes, to choose a couple of places. Thank you. The few years, is there a outside limit to what a few years is?
Yeah, I talked to the city's finance director, and she said they would have to have some sort of like a term in there. But generally speaking, once you take out your construction loan, you know, unless something super catastrophic happens, you're going forward with your project because you can't afford to just sit on that money. You got to build out your project. You know, we've all lived through probably horrific recessions and seen projects stop mid-construction. I mean, that is a thing that can happen, but pretty rare. I mean, I know not impossible, but obviously I want this, what I'm asking for this board to give me the authority is to allow us to piggyback on it, but I will definitely be reading what their application says, because I'm worried about bankruptcies, stuff like that. And I want to make sure there's language in there that says, okay, well, if the guy pulls his building permit, doesn't pay us, gets 90% of the way done with a project, files bankruptcy, and then says, sorry, I'm not paying anybody. We'd still want to make sure there's somehow we're protected in that regard. And so I want to read whatever the language comes up with and how that looks before we'd sign off to be part of a deferral. And the way I understand it is their expectation is it's only going to be the really big projects that go through the headache of this application and agreement to do it, because the numbers really aren't super meaningful until they get big.
Thank you.
Director Nichols.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I too had a few questions like that. You know, for example, there are some projects that are developed in phases. You know, it's kind of hard to develop a multifamily building in phases, but I have seen it done. And so, you know, then it's an incremental certificate of occupancy. Is there some mechanism where it's not just you get paid once when it's all done, but you know, you get paid incrementally as these C of Os are issued? So I know some of that's in the details, and I'm not expecting you to answer me, but I think as you go through that, you know, whether it's liens, acquiring a bond, you know, getting something on the title, whatever it is, it's some type of security, I think would be essential. You know, the city has lots of fees, but they also have a budget that's 10 times our size. So while you stated in your report that, you know, would create a little constraint as far as trying to get projects done, in the city's report, they said there's no negative impact to them whatsoever. It's like, okay, we can't quite say that. So we're in a little different position. So we do need to be a little more cautious and things like that. I did notice that this is a temporary program that expires in 1 year. So it'll only be whatever comes through the pipeline over the next 12 months. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's my understanding.
Okay. All right.
It's to kind of open up a window. Come on, guys, jump through this window, do it. Like, go for your projects. Don't wait whatever this economic cycle is and wait 5 years. They want people that can jump through the window to jump through the window.
Okay. So they got to be shovel ready practically.
Yeah.
Okay. And then also, you know, even treasury rates change. So would it be appropriate to set a minimum percentage? You know, if they were to start going down, say, yeah, 4.4, but it has to be at least, I don't know, 4%, whatever it is. That is, in other words, it has to be worth our effort. They got to pay a little something to make it worth our effort, and we have to benefit from it in some way. So that might change a little bit as well. And let's see. I think there was one other. Okay, got that one. Got that one. Oh, and just as more of a question, is there any need for a resolution for something like this, or is this something that can just be done at the staff level without any issue?
Yeah. So a motion by the board and a resolution are the same thing. It's just that you would look to the staff report to and what the language of the actual motion is to kind of look at the import of it. So a motion by a board and the resolution are functionally equivalent.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I didn't know if it rose to that level where it was necessary. Obviously, you do these things more than I do, but it just seemed like it almost fit in that type of category for me. Yeah, and I think the concern, just as you mentioned, Mr. Friedel, was with the potential for going bankrupt. You know, that's my concern. And it's not necessarily, I mean, if we get all of our money up front and then they go bankrupt, it's just like, okay, did we contribute to that? It's like, I don't want to be in that position. But at the same time, if we're certainly due money that, you know, they got so far along and we should be getting something and we don't, I just would like to make sure there's a mechanism to ensure that doesn't happen. So that would be my only further comment on that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? If not, I will entertain a motion on the staff recommendation from someone.
Sure.
Director Nichols.
Yes, I'll move to authorize staff to follow with this deferred process as stated in their recommendation.
Thank you.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Any further comments or questions? If not, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. The motion carries unanimously. Moving along, item 10, reports and announcements, recreation highlights, and budget performance report. Does anyone have any questions or comments on either of those items? No, thank you very much. Item 11, department reports, Parks Division. Mr. Parks.
Thank you, Chair Heffer, members of the board. Quickly, just letting you guys know, staff is going to be going out to a couple of the sites that we've contemplated some pickleball at. And so we're doing some additional outreach the first week of November. And so we've been working with the ad hoc committee, and we're going to go out and get a little bit more feedback, looking at possible trial pickleball courts. So we're going to be mailing out some notices, putting some signage on the properties, and updating the website, and sending out some emails to the community that's interested in the development of pickleball courts. So with that, I'm available for questions.
Any questions for Mr. Mooney? No, then
I have a quickie. I'm referring to the potential pickleball sites. Is that all of them that the ad hoc committee had come up with, or just a few of those?
We're looking at 2 sites because they have existing opportunity to have multi-use courts at, as well as we added a 3rd site in Estella, which currently has pickleball striped. It just does not have nets there because it was a bring your own net to play. So we're looking at opportunities to bring in some trial use there with nets available for public use. So and that would be at all 3 sites with fully netted multi-use courts or standalone courts.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Mooney? If not, we will move along to Recreation Division.
Thank you, Chair Heffer, members of the board. I had nothing, but then I took lots of notes while I was here, so now I have something. So just so you guys know, I actually went out to the rec van event this past weekend. It was really nice. They had about 10 kids at Kimber Park, and then 4 at the one before that. Got some more ideas, talked to some people about how we're marketing and stuff. So we've got some ideas with that. Also went to the Teen Center block party. It was super exciting to see that place busy. So it was 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. So much fun. So many kids, bounce houses. They seemed to be having a great time. And it was really nice to see that all going on. Things that are coming up, quick reminders, Haunted Trail on Saturday, 6 to 9. McCrae Ranch is doing a new event, not this weekend, but next Saturday from noon to 2. It is a family harvest festival from, I just said noon to 2, and it's $15 per youth. Adults are no fee, because hopefully you're not dropping your kids off. But they're going to have pumpkins and face painting and popcorn and all sorts of different things, and the kids get to dress up, and they're going to go trick-or-treating to the different sites at the McCrae. So I don't know if Nellie, you're going to be there or not, but the other thing is Veterans Day is coming up. So the Global Center is doing their normal breakfast. That's free for veterans, so make sure you get your tickets at the Global Center. That'll be from 8:30 to 10:30. I know that the organization that Susan's husband Ed volunteered for is got the park reserved, but I've looked all over online and I cannot find any information about that event. So I will double check with Andy and see who's the main contact for that, and see if I can't get some information and send it out to you guys before. But usually it's right after the breakfast or about an hour after the breakfast. So we are planning to set it up.
That most likely would be Jerry Knott's.
Okay. And then just a couple of things just for you guys to know. I've been telling you our marketing committee's been working on a new design for the program guide that's getting closer. That will be our winter guide that will be coming out. It will be by age instead of by unit. So be prepared for that. The other thing that we're looking at, as you know, we've been celebrating our 60th anniversary. So on behind you guys, you can see the 60th anniversary logo that we had for the year. You can also see on that our original logo and the current logo that we use. And so one of the things that marketing has been doing is they thought it would be a good idea to maybe do a refresh or a tweak to our current branded logo. So we are actually meeting with the Art Ad Hoc Committee tomorrow at noon, and they have a couple designs that they're going to be showing the committee, and maybe when marketing does their presentation in November, we might have a little tweak or something to show you and see what you think. So that's going on. Also, thank you very much for the photo contest info. So this was for the employees. So we'll be tallying up that, and hopefully we'll have a couple winners. And then we also did a community one. We had 75 people or 75 entries of pictures in that. So what we're doing this year, I think I mentioned it before, but at the end of this year, we are not doing calendars. We are doing stationery. So the people who used to get calendars are going to get 12 stationery cards. We're going to encourage writing of thank yous notes or little notes to people. So we'll be using the pictures, maybe the winners, maybe not the winners. It depends on the quality of the photos for marketing, if we can or can't use them. But we're getting 3 winners for the public, and they're going to be getting a water bottle. And then our winners for our staff will get a little something also. So, and with that, I am available for any questions.
Any questions for Ms. Callis? Director Lang.
Yes, thank you, Chair Huffer. On your handout on the summer program survey of satisfaction, et cetera, I was curious where people, quote unquote, strongly disagree, you know, on whether they should tell their friends about it. Would I recommend this class for family or friends, et cetera? Is that defined a little more? I mean, is it an opportunity for us? Obviously, there's more strongly that agree than disagree, but just thinking there might be some source of feedback that might benefit, you know, a particular program and so forth.
Sure. I don't have what you have in front of you in front of me, because I think that was at the last board meeting. But I can tell you that all the responses that people give us, if they write something in there, that information goes back to the units. We can actually pull from the surveys what unit they're from. So if they marked, I go to the Global Center and here's my comments on these questions, then all the Global Center comments get pushed to Tim, who then shares them with Patty and her team. So it is divided down to that level. And if anything's written, those written things go out. So it gives them opportunities to work on things. There's also a lot of times where people will actually comment about a specific teacher or individual. And Melissa actually writes a little note to the teacher or the staff. So people, so whether it's a good thing that they call someone out, then they get recognized. And if it's something we can work on, that's taken to the unit also to work on it. But like you said, overall, it's usually about 80-90% everybody's satisfied or higher.
Correct. But I just was thinking, here's another potential source, you know, it's already here. is there some information to
Mhm.
better define it, you know? But anyway, thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions or comments from Ms. Callis? Okay, our management services is not represented. Are you filling in or?
I have no report this evening.
Well done.
That was Cheryl.
Yeah. Then we'll move to our general manager.
Just a bunch of really quick dates, more or less things. COSF had its Echo Fest at Conejo Creek North on October 7th. It was very hot, so the turnout I think was a little suppressed, but it was a very nice event that we thank COSF for coordinating and putting on. And by the way, mentioning COSF, on Saturday they have their trail work day on Saturday the 21st, so that's coming up. On Friday the 13th, I did accept an invitation from Supervisor Gorell's office for a Rolling Oaks Neighborhood Homeowners Association meeting, and I was one of many different departments that showed up. And I will say there was actually, it seemed almost a more warmer reception than the first time from the community about, the idea of a park in that neighborhood and stuff. So I think it's seeping into the consciousness there, and I think they actually are starting to think about what they do want to see in the park, not what they're afraid of from the park. So it was actually a pretty good meeting. Staff did the great shakeout today here. So we did do an evacuation and kind of talked about emergency preparedness, which was great. Ride-On's fundraiser is this Sunday for those of you attending. The large events committee will be meeting on the 24th. So we're going to have a rep from Conejo Valley Days, the Chili Cook-Off, and Wild Oaks to come and talk to the committee about, what it is, what their event's all about, but then, not just the event itself, which is itself a benefit to the community, but what from the event are they able to then contribute on top of that to the community. So that'll be a good discussion. As a reminder, we're canceling the November 2nd board meeting because the Ventura County will be having its 150th State of the County, 150th anniversary and State of the County at the Reagan. So I know many of you are going there. I will not be able to join you because the Capri board will be in town here visiting our district. And then I just wanted to give you a heads up that we have applied to the Santa Monica Mountains Conservancy for sort of non-native plant removal outside of jurisdictional wetland areas. So we're hoping we're successful in that. I'm hearing from staff that might even make the November meeting. So fingers crossed. We'll see. With that, I'm available for questions.
Any questions for the general manager? No? In that case, we'll move along to director's reports and follow-up reports. I think I started that way last time, so I'm going to start with Director Nichols this time.
Okay. Just as a follow-up to the general manager's comments about the meeting with Supervisor Gorell and the Rolling Oaks, as a follow-up to that, I had a phone call from a resident that I would say is an acquaintance, not really a friend. It started off about talking about the park, about the Los Robles project, about COSCA, about the Planning Commission, about the city college, just kind of went. But it was a good, I think what's nice to know is that they feel they can reach out to the park district as a local representation, so to speak, where the city council is not so readily at their disposal. And yet I encourage them to do that because of our city council being so receptive to all residents. I know a lot of the city council members fully recognize as our county residents as being equally impacted and also representative of our community. So they were relieved to hear that. And I think they were going to actually take me up on my suggestion and actually contact them, which was good. I had a nice meeting with Frank Acree. We talked about Conejo Valley Days. I'd never really had any conversation with Frank before, so it was nice just to sit down and talk with him. Very passionate about Conejo Valley Days, but it was a good conversation. And then yesterday, spent the day traveling back and forth to Roseville for a California RPD Board of Directors. I feel like I was getting my stamina up to be like George. We had a 4.5-hour meeting, so I feel like almost like what George does every day, going to his meetings. But it was quite a review over our legislative activities. and did get a nice PowerPoint presentation as well before it got along to our general manager, just to kind of help him recap. I don't know if they could be sharing that at our next legislative committee meeting or not, but it was just a good recap. And I was going to have more to say, but there was so much to say that I thought, I'm just going to postpone that. But just to refresh what I told our lobbyist, Alyssa, RPPG, the organization that represents us, as I said, we accomplished so much this year. It was just like we learned kind of how to do things. So it's like now next year we're ready to actually do things. And I think that was kind of what the board's perception was, that it was just kind of getting a handle on the legislative process itself. And I think we did accomplish a lot. And she gave a nice list of what those accomplishments are. So I just wanted to share those with the board, but share that with the general manager, and perhaps he can put something together for everybody as well. But thank you for the time to share.
Director Cusworth.
Yes, I want to start out with just a couple of shout outs. It's always nice for me when I see our staff in action. So my daughter called and said, would you go to comedy night with me? And I said, sure. And I just wanted to say that Lauren did an incredibly good job. I don't know if she was the actual one in charge, but if she wasn't, she seemed like she was in charge as she was communicating with all of the other staff members to organize the concessions, the ticket sales, the people coming in, getting checked in, announcing when the show was going to start. And I guess we're back to pre-COVID levels as their shows are selling out. So great job, Lauren, on that very successful evening. And then I also wanted to just give a shout out also to Julie Spivak, who's over our senior volunteers. I'm in communication with her. I have been for many times just for volunteers at the Stagecoach Inn, but we were emailing about some other issues. She gets right back to me. She's on top of it. And, if we didn't have all of our senior volunteers in this community, we would not have the type of community that we have. And it takes somebody who is really sharp and on top of it to keep track of all of these people. And I think the senior volunteers in our community are usually very intelligent. They have a lot of experience and they bring a lot to all of our nonprofits. So a shout out to Julie. And then one other thing that I thought was wonderful, almost daily, Harvey and I go to Waverly Park and work out on that free equipment, which we enjoy. Yesterday, when I was there was some graffiti on the pavement. And I thought to myself, I need to call Andrew or Matt about that. But I forgot, the day happens. When we got there this morning, there was Floyd and Brandon, and that graffiti was gone. And I know it hadn't been there the day before, at least I hadn't seen it. And it's right by where I exercise. So I just wanted to give them a shout out that our staff is just so on top of it. We have such a good staff. So I talked to them a little bit and thanked them for their great service. So I went to I think Echo Fest is what you called it. They called it Plantapalooza. So I was there talking to a lot of the vendors, which was very nice. It was a great activity. And then I went to a Conejo Valley Days meeting with Frank and several of his board members. I guess he's brought people back from the past who have been on that. And we met over at Eggs and Things and had a good discussion with them. Again, he was very, very enthusiastic. I came to the Arts Jubilee that was here and talked with, I believe, Ed Smart, talked with a lot of the vendors that were out there and watched a few of the performers. I was very inspired by Susan's presentation. So I kind of just wanted to get another feel. And just to say, at comedy night, they were also doing a Gilbert and Sullivan operetta, and there was also people looking at the art that's hanging always in here. This is one of our better art galleries. It was just a very nice representation of just what this building is bringing to the cultural community in our area. So that was wonderful. I went to a McCrae Ranch event that was not as a board member, but as a volunteer. But I was just letting you know that Wyatt had all of these members from the Oklahoma Cowboy and Western Heritage Museum in Oklahoma, which I hear is a magnificent museum. I haven't been there. I've never been to Oklahoma. But they all came and we gave them tours, and they had a magnificent dinner outside. And hopefully some of them will want to donate to keeping the ranching heritage alive in the Conejo Valley. As I said to them, we don't have much of a ranching heritage here, but what we have here at McCrae Ranch represents the best that we have, because it's all that we have left, with an original owner's descendant being involved, which of course in Oklahoma, they have a lot of ranches there that are a lot more than what we ever had. But that was the beginning of this community, our ranches. So I was, excited that Wyatt had that activity there. I will be at McCrae Ranch on the 28th. I will also be at the Stagecoach Inn. I thought that McCrae Ranch started at 11. It starts at 12?
The information I have is 12. That's what it says on registration. So maybe you, if you're volunteering, you have to be there at 11.
So I'm not going to be able to stay at I double booked and didn't realize it, but I'm not going to be able to stay at both activities the whole time, but I will be able to come back and report of how they both went. So hopefully it will be great for both of them. And I think that concludes my report.
Thank you very much, Director Buss.
Okay, so I wasn't here at the last meeting. So since previously, we had a Conejo Youth and Family Coalition meeting, and we're just basically discussing the seminar that we do. It's not really a seminar. The summit, that's what it is. So we were discussing the summit and making it longer and how to get people more engaged and what have you. So that was kind of our conversation there. Then I met with the ad hoc art committee and education, and we are talking about the logo potentially, some different signage that Nellie had brought up that I thought was great for some of the parks for the adults who are frequenting the park. And then I went to the special districts dinner. And then last weekend, I actually was for 2 whole days at the Earl Warren Equestrian Center in Santa Barbara. And I have to say, because I had never been there for a horse show and I think it's a really interesting concept of everything. They had also a night market that was going off over on the other side parking lot. But I thought it was just an interesting thing to see, because it's pretty nicely done. I mean, there's lots of space and what have you, but it's then more compact. Just comparing it to our equestrian facility over off of Conejo Northwest, I think, or West. No, yes, Northwest. Thank you. Yeah, so I thought that was really interesting to see and gave me some great insight for maybe some ideas for that. And that's it.
Can I ask you what a night market is?
Oh, yeah. So it's pretty interesting because I think we had a night market in the soccer fields parking lot over the summer, right? Or is coming up.
We had one for sure, and I think they're planning on booking more in the next summer.
I was bummed, and a lot of us were bummed that we didn't know it was going to be there. So what it is it's like 40 different food vendors, like food trucks and different food vendors, and then they have which we were enjoying during the costume round of the horse show. They have like a DJ and dance floor, and so you could hear the music. And oh yeah, no, it looked like people were having like a really good time there. So I was like, oh, this is kind of interesting.
Yeah, they had the first one here at the Oaks Mall in their parking lot, and then the second one was in our parking lot.
And did they have the same, or was theirs just kind of food? This one was like a full DJ going.
I went to the first one at the Oaks,
yeah,
and it was food, music, and there were a couple of like vendor booths.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, it was sold out, so we couldn't even get tickets that day when we figured out what it was.
The one here is free, but you do have to get your ticket
yes.
online, so you have to have a ticket.
It was the same way. So it was free, but I think, and I said to them, because they were like, well, why would you do that if it's free? And I said, well, it's to control the occupancy of the event because they only want so many people there at one time. But yeah, so kind of a fun pop-up event. It looked like and I think it was only one day there because they weren't there on Sunday.
Yeah, I think go for it, pursue it.
Well, yeah, and if, I mean, we're not using the parking lot and you can rent it out during, that's great.
Director Lang, I'm assuming you had nothing going on the last couple of weeks?
Almost nothing. As the general manager mentioned, going to solicit the Santa Monica Mountains Conservancy for a grant to cover the invasive species removal, et cetera. But I did have a Santa Monica Mountains Conservancy meeting. With Judy's situation, I was kind of absent from a number of meetings and activities that I normally would, but that's it, Santa Monica Mountains Conservancy.
Quiet couple of weeks for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well, I checked my calendar and I was spent most of the last 2 weeks with grandkids. I was the morning after our last board meeting at dark 100, I was ready to fly out to Hawaii, and I won't get into the details as to what happened, but ended up missing my 7 o'clock flight and had to wait for a flight from LAX to Seattle to Honolulu. So I got into Honolulu at dark 100 at night, but whatever. But I got a chance to check out all the recreational facilities in Oahu. They're doing fine there. We need to come up with a good ocean beach program like they have there. But and then this past weekend, got a chance to visit 4 of our playgrounds with my 3-year-old grandson from Seattle. And I have to add my thanks to the park staff. We were over at Northwood Neighborhood Park, and my 3-year-old grandson was on all the equipment. It was for 5 to 12-year-olds, and it's going down one of the slides. And fortunately, nothing happened, but I was ready to catch him at the bottom of the slide, and there was a big crack in the plastic slide there. So I called Andrew, and even before we left, I can't remember who was who came over, but had it all taped off, and did leave my grandson in tears because that was his favorite slide, and he can no longer slide on it. But oh well, that happens. So, but he did enjoy the 4 playgrounds we went to. I decided that at 3 years old, he wasn't quite ready to rate the playgrounds like I had my 7-year-old granddaughter do a couple of months ago. But he loved every one of them, particularly Ant Hill over at Thousand Oaks Community Park. That place was mobbed. And the people there, they obviously learned, but there was a birthday party going on, and every child coming to the birthday party had a big piece of cardboard that they brought with them so they could slide down Ant Hill. So they know what's available there. So that's all I had to report. Item 12, request for status reports and items for subsequent agendas. Yes, Director Cusworth.
I would like to request that we have a item on our agenda about the future of pocket or urban parks and the feasibility in our valley as compared to other communities in the Southern California or greater United States area. How much time do you think it would take for staff to put together something like that, Mr. Friedel?
You know, there's probably people that are experts in this that we aren't. So we might want to look for somebody that is, if you guys want to do it at that quality level. If you want us to just kind of do, you know, what we have with the staff resources we have, it'd probably, you know, take a little bit of time. I'm going to look to Andrew because your staff are going to be the ones, planners and such.
6 months, 8 months?
Sure. Yeah. In the first 6 months of next year, we can bring back some information for you guys and kind of digest it and review it. I think it might go hand in hand with some of our master plan work that we might be working through in the next 6 months as the general plan gets wrapped up. Hopefully this fall, and then go from there. So
I think that'd be a good addition to our master plan if we were thinking we wanted to put in some smaller parks, because we might want to adjust our master plan to reflect that. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Director Nichols?
Yes, I would like to also request an item that's a follow-up to our discussion earlier this evening, but more focused for staff to prepare policy guidelines for future development projects that are proposing on-site parks, and I put that in quotes, that are proposed for public access And it's not necessarily in lieu of, but as consideration for Quimby fee assessments, much like we saw tonight. And I think with some of the things I saw in the presentation that Mr. Mooney gave, I think there's certain things like a percentage of the acreage, set up a minimum that could be, a percentage of the, a dollar amount, how that, there's a formula to kind of get that squared away. Also public access, like the one we saw tonight, had street access. So would have to have, access from the public right of way, not some, back corner of the property. I think we also heard the urban or pocket park, so I won't include that part, but also amenities that would be included. So it actually resembles a park. And then also some of the items you mentioned about being deficient in certain areas where it would be, helpful if we were deficient and maybe not so much in other areas. And then also, I don't know if it needs to be specific to Thousand Oaks specific plan. I think that's where the bulk of the activity would be. But also with the proposed general plan, there will be areas like the Jan's Marketplace, the Oaks Mall, our neighborhood shopping areas that are proposed for mixed use. I think we need to include that as well. But I think you have a good sense of the types of things. It's just having something that we could adopt as a policy and then also hand to developers as guidelines. And I don't know if it's one and the same or perhaps a derivative thereof, but I think that would be helpful. And one last thing, this goes back to Lauren again. At our last concert in the park, one of the band members was questioning me. He says, do you have like a voice actor? Somebody does all your pre-recordings for your announcements? And I go, no, she's sitting right over there doing it live. He goes, oh my gosh, she is terrific. So thank you, Lauren.
Okay, thank you very much. Director Lang.
Yes, unfortunately, I don't know if it's that important, but if the staff can communicate to Melissa Smith about an agenda on our next closed session, I'd like to have opportunity to discuss more of our liabilities, claims, et cetera, amongst the board member and with Melissa on some of these claims.
Yeah, so from the last quarter, like all the stuff that's on there.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely, for sure.
I mean, it's been a while since, we've seen some of these, and there's obviously a number of more new ones, but I think it's a good opportunity, good chance for the board to get a better understanding of some of these issues that we're having to deal with under the claims and liabilities.
Anything else? Goodness, it's the most time we spent on that item, and I don't know how long. Mark, do we have any hundreds of people waiting to make public comments online? Oh, okay. Apparently we do have need for an executive closed session, which Mr. Friedel promises me will be brief.
There's 5 other people that have to agree with that. So, but yes, government code section 54-957, we have a need for closed session, public employee performance evaluation, general manager, no announcement is expected.
Thank you very much. And with that, we will adjourn.